And don't be a Richard, and forget to shop merch for the perp on YGoProject.com. That's YGoProject.com/merch-with-a-perp. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Trauma Translator Live. This is with your host, Lauren Friedman. I'm here today with Brian Spracklen from BlueBridge Alliance. And before we dive into that, I just wanted to give everybody a quick update on some events that are going on and some things we're working on. So I in partnership with Propel Earth and Steph and Michael, we are going to be hosting an anxiety antidote networking event next week on March 20th in New York City. It's a Friday evening. The whole thing is come as you are. We have the anxiety antidote for you, because I felt anxiety for the first time at almost 40 years old. And as I've been on this healing journey, it's really been a journey of enlightenment. I realized that, oh my gosh, this is what everyone else has been talking about forever. And I didn't even know what that felt like because I never was in my body. So as I started to really become a human again and learn how to human, I began attending events when I was able to leave my house again, and everything started to come together, and I started having anxiety. So I realized that everyone needs a way to reset their nervous system in these types of networking environments. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned vet, if you're an extrovert or an introvert, everybody needs to reset their nervous system in real time. So if you want to join our anxiety antidote event next week in New York City, look at the QR code and just sign up there. And if you're interested in getting on the mailing list, go to the website and sign up for our mailing list, because we'll be coming to a city near you soon. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brian.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's such an honor to have you. And I know that we talked about this before we went on just a little bit, but I'd love to do just a breathing exercise with you before we jump in, just to reset our nervous systems, because, you know, going live can be a little stressful, right? And It's early. You're on the West Coast. So I want to make sure that everybody is all good to go. So what I like to use is a Camuso Shift necklace. It's one of my affiliate partners. I've been actually using this necklace since before they were one of my partners, before I went to market, when I was just a civilian. Well, I'm still a civilian. When I was just a person in corporate America that was learning how to breathe. So we did have the co-founders on the show a few weeks ago, and it was one of my favorite episodes. And we did a breathing exercise together at the end. And my intention for this podcast and this live has always been to start at the beginning, because it's the actual foundation of how we could have an authentic connection. So what I like to do is a 4-4-8 breath, meaning you inhale for 4 through your nose, hold for 4, and then exhale for 8. And because you don't probably have one of these, you could just do it through your mouth. So if you don't mind, let's do it together.
Sure.
So for 4. And the whole goal with this is that when on the exhale, is the longer that you exhale, the more effective it is for your body. It actually reduces your heart rate in real time. It reduces your blood pressure. It gets your body into a state of rest and digest versus being a dysregulated state. So this is something I depend upon at all times, and I use it before every meeting. And I wanted the audience to just hear about it today. So without further ado, Brian, tell us about yourself.
Well, so for context, I actually come from the tech industry. I was in tech startups for about 20 years. I was also a firefighter back in the early 2000s. But I came from a law enforcement family. My dad and my uncle were both in law enforcement. They started on the local side and ended up in the federal side. But that kind of is my connection to what, BlueBridge is all about. And BlueBridge is an organization that enables police and sheriff's deputies to provide immediate life-altering human needs. And most of the time, it's just by providing the simple things like a meal or groceries, warm clothes, transportation options. Sometimes it's covering an issue that needs to be fixed. And they do this by carrying a BlueBridge debit card. And that debit card has a modest but effective balance on it, typically under $100. And that gives them the flexibility to really bridge those gaps in the moment when they're needed most. And those cards are funded actually by their local community through donations locally. at BlueBridge, we really started and continue to have this fundamental overarching 3 pillars, and those 3 pillars are first and one of the most important really here is to simply help people out. And sometimes it's a matter of need and safety. Sometimes it's in lieu of punitive actions that could, send a person into a deeper spiral. The second is to strengthen that trust and the relationships between police and the communities that they serve. Study after study after study shows that when trust is high, public safety improves and crime decreases. And then the third is enhancing departmental culture and officer mental health. Contrary to what many people might think, dealing with people all day who are at their lowest or are having the worst day of their life has an enormous impact on officer mental health. And our program provides officers with the ability to help solve situations and, truly help people, which is why most people get into police work, period. So at the end of the day, it's really about believing that, trust is built in the smallest of moments and often right in the middle of a crisis. And through the interactions that officers are able to do with the BlueBridge program, an officer can turn a potential point of trauma into really a moment of tangible support. So by solving, those small problems before they become systemic tragedies, they're not just changing an encounter; they're really changing the trajectory of humans' life.
That's absolutely beautiful. And I just want to say, number one, thank you so much for your service as a firefighter. And 2, it's just a wonderful mission. And you're 100% right. Number one, I love the way you spoke about trust is built in those small moments. And you're right. It's not the big moments. It's those small moments, but they add up. I call it actually a seek parvis magna moment, greatness from small beginnings. And it could start with yourself. It could start with another person, right? But when you were talking about those small moments and how this lives in the first responders' bodies, that's 100% correct. And most people do go into, like you said, this with a servant heart. They want to help people, and they don't realize that actually all of the things that they're doing to protect others is actually destabilizing their nervous system, because unless you know how to release that from your body, you have no ability to actually feel better. And they don't even know that they're not feeling well, because we're just used to going in these cycles of just go. And until recently, nobody really understood the mind-body connection. So I think it's beautiful. Can you share a little bit? I know that you touched upon all the different ways that you're helping, these police officers in real time. Is it just police officers? Is it all first responders? Is it, because as I mentioned to you, I do work with veteran communities and first responders communities that are inclusive of both police officers and firefighters and EMTs, and it runs the spectrum. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about the area that BlueBridge Alliance is actually serving. And I love those cards. So interesting. Tell us a little bit more about your footprint.
Yeah, so we do just work with law enforcement right now. We've talked a lot about eventually, having fire departments involved. Teachers too are another one. They're on the front line of seeing things that happen that are really difficult, and oftentimes they don't have the resources or ability to just help bridge that gap. And so we started in Washington State. We started small back in 2020. We actually launched the first programs in early 2022 once we were able to secure some funding. And we piloted the program with 9 agencies across the state. And we chose each one of them because they were different. They were different in geography, obviously. They were different in demographics. They were different in socioeconomics, and all of those things together. And what's been interesting for me to find is that every community has its unique challenges, and so we wanted to see how BlueBridge helps in those individual challenges that each agency experiences. And the results were tremendous. Every single agency that we worked with loved the program. They loved, being able to help in those small moments and provide huge impact within that. So then the legislature got together and said, hey, let's help expand this. So in Washington state, we were able to grow that last year to another 60 plus agencies throughout the state. Our intention is, especially in this next year, to start rolling out more nationally. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of agencies across the United States that have reached out wanting a BlueBridge program. We just need to find the funding to do it. So that's kind of what is keeping us back right now. We're sort of redlined with our capacity until we can secure funding to start rolling out to more agencies across the United States.
Yeah, it's a beautiful mission. And that makes complete sense. As I mentioned to you prior to this, like I've been working with several veterans communities that also have similar missions, right? To help people in real time in those small moments, whether it's, someone's in the middle of a divorce and they need somewhere to just go for the night, or they need to get picked up on the side of the road, or they need clothing or food. And those moments matter. That's a life or death situation in a lot of cases. And it could be like taking your own life situation. Like some of the veteran groups, like that's one of my missions. I don't know if you know anything about me, but my dad did commit suicide, and that he actually worked with, he worked for a veterans hospital when in the 70s. So it's kind of how I feel like I've been being guided by suicide spirit guides, and I'm part of a CrossFit community. So it kind of all came together, but everything you're talking about is very similar to what those other organizations are trying to do as well. And it's hard without funding. Now, you had mentioned though that the preloaded cards, debit cards, are funded by the community. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the way that we're set up, every agency has its own dedicated BlueBridge program, and the way that we've set this up from a technology standpoint is, each agency has a fundraising, that we manage a fundraising account, basically. So when their local community wants to donate to the program, it stays within their particular community and their agency. So, it works out really well because it allows members of the community to actually feel like they're part of something and that they're contributing to, to their own public safety. So it works out really well. And, we've found great success in every community that we're in terms of, being able to get that support from the community.
So how does that work exactly? I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I want to literally understand so I can share this with other people. So BlueBridge Alliance is kind of like the infrastructure behind it, right? And you're partnering with all those different agencies in a municipality capacity, right? Across the state of Washington right now. And then you plan on rolling it out throughout the country. So you're the infrastructure behind it. So you're taking your tech background, right? And you're integrating into those municipalities. And then they're the ones that are responsible for disseminating and dispersing those cards, or they're just raising the funds and the funds stay with them. How does that work?
Yeah. So, we, of course, being it's a great question. Being the nonprofit that really is the backbone of the entire program at large, all of the money really feeds through us. And, and it's not like necessarily, officers are going out asking for people to donate to this. It's more people want to. Typically, they're sharing stories of how it's helping the community through, their social channels. And so that's what really gets people to, to donate to their programs. But we provide, like you said, the technology infrastructure. So, we provide them the cards, we provide them with their spending accounts. We provide them with the guidelines and the procedures and the accountability. We have controls in place to make sure that, it's not being abused. And, so far we haven't had any, any issues. First of all, there's not the cards don't carry a huge amount of money that, can really be abused to begin with. But
I don't think that wouldn't be a big, I mean, I personally don't think police officers are looking to like take advantage of a nonprofit that's trying to help them, right? Like, it's not like $1,000 on the cards.
Yeah, not at all. But that's, that's what we do. And we, we monitor everything. We make sure that the agencies are being their own advocates, and their best advocates for themselves in, telling the story about how they're using, their BlueBridge program. And it works out great. The model allows the agencies and the officers to have, a certain amount of autonomy. And really that's, hey, would you pull your own wallet out to deal with this situation? And if the answer is yes, then, to us, that's a good use case. One of the coolest things about my job is every day I get to wake up and review all of the reports that come in from officers using the program. Because that's, part of the accountability structure is they have to, submit a short report that gives us data and helps us understand what the interaction was. And every week without fail, I see at least one use case that I've never seen before. And it's always, it's always pretty cool to see how officers can utilize the program in creative ways. So
tell me about a fun use case, because your face literally lit up with passion and excitement when you talked about this. And I understand that. So I love that. So I want to know, tell me about one of your favorite use cases that we wouldn't think of.
Yeah, well, here was one that actually I think of a lot. And it was one of our first use cases when we started the program. Officers were called to, and they'd been called several times to this house because the house stunk. And I mean, you could smell it from the road. All the neighbors would be complaining. So officer shows up and, he knocks on the door and he finds that this person had been hoarding their garbage in their house. They weren't putting their garbage out. And, you've got to assume there's probably some mental health issues with this person, but also the biggest thing was that they couldn't afford trash pickup. And so they didn't know what else to do. They were and they were keeping the trash inside their house because they didn't want it to stink up the neighborhood, but it still did. And so the officers were like, hey, you know what? My day off is on Saturday and I'm going to rent a truck and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to help you load all of this garbage up and I'm going to take it to the dump for you. And so they used the BlueBridge funds to, pay for the dump fee and truck and all that kind of good stuff. And, that helped solve the problem for, for the not just that person, but for everybody that lives around them. Yeah. And it also was now, and by the way, I forgot to mention, they were able to connect this person with the trash pickup vendor and they have a special program for people that can't afford things. And so they were able to connect them with that. And that's a big part of BlueBridge too, is making those connections. And so it wasn't going to be a problem anymore. Now that just did several things. Obviously it helped that person, helped the neighborhood. It also keeps officers from having to return to that call, return to that location for the same, complaint.
Same problem over. Well, yeah. So it's an efficiency play. You're saving dollars at the end of the day by spending once and helping this community. So that's interesting to me, though, that those officers spent their own money that they could have used for themselves, right, to help this community in need. And it's funny because I know about that because I have some friends who are from Washington State, and I never would have known that you have to pay for your own trash disposal. Yeah. And that is hard, especially people who do have mental health issues end up, there's a lot. That's why there's all I call it let that go the way to shame. And people end up hoarding things and they don't know what to do with it, or they can't afford it, and there's so much shame around it. I'm actually gonna be posting something later on Instagram about let that go the way to shame. And it comes in many forms. So like you said, like that's a major problem. It's not only cleanliness, it's the neighborhood, but it could attract rodents, it could attract filth. And So it's really important that what you guys are doing, that's an amazing use case that I never would have thought of, So I think that's really cool. So with the teacher thing is interesting too for me, because my mom worked in a school, my dad worked in a hospital. They were both social workers, very much involved in these activities. So I feel like I'm continuing their legacy, and trying to help others and sharing this insane story, because everyone needs to heal from something. And so when you think about the teachers use case, one of my missions is to get in front of education professionals, medical community, because nobody understood the mind-body connection. My hair was falling out in 2014 after I lost 100 pounds, and my hairdresser noticed. I didn't notice. I have long hair. My hair just always sheds, So I never considered that it was falling out, and she noticed it first. And I wrote something dumb on Facebook. Facebook was still a thing. And one of my roommates from college responded, and she's like, you need to get a hormone panel. So I ended up going to the doctor like way later after this, and they tried to misdiagnose me, and they ended up sending me to an endocrinologist, and they thought that I had a tumor in my adrenal gland. So like nobody's well informed about this. My mom was on a child study team. She was on a child study team, and I flew right under the radar. She would always say to me like, oh, you fidget like the kids in my school. Meanwhile, I did. And I was literally a walking picture of somatic responses to trauma, but because nobody understood it, I never had an IEP. My grades didn't suffer. I was in AP and honors classes. So like when you think about getting in front of the educational community, it's more than just supporting these teachers in need. It's actually educating them how they could be better teachers and better people in society supporting their community. Because when you learn about nervous system regulation and, trauma, it's something you can't unsee, right? Like, is that something you feel as well?
Absolutely. And, for, especially for first responders, we know that it's only been within the last few years, half a dozen years that there's been a little bit more of a focus on, identifying that and helping that out. Prior to that, there were, some different ways to deal with it, but what you find, and you hear this time and time again, especially from people that have been in, first response for several years, is that you drink it away. You go to the bar, you drink away your problems, and of course that just compounds things. And so, now the other piece of it was, for a long time, if you told anybody that you were suffering from, any sort of trauma or mental health, it could end your career.
100%. I mean, my dad worked in a hospital for 25 years, and he worked there for 25 years. He was a case manager, and he was so unwell at one point that he ended up taking a nap in the ER, and they fired him. And like, we could like, at the time, my mom was like, looking into legal recourse, but we didn't have any money. And it was like, I was a freshman in college. So like, there's major stigmas. Like, I've never been on a psychiatric drug. It affected my thyroid. I've never even taken a Xanax, but growing up, when my dad would have these suicide attempts, my mom was like, we can't tell the neighbors, we can't ask for help. People are scared of the mentally ill. So like, especially in the police force, in the police academy, showing any sign of weakness when it's mainly males, right? Males are not allowed to have emotions. Men are not allowed to feel any feelings. They're supposed to, be strong and protect everybody. So especially in the police and first responder community, this is so important. I actually, I was working with a woman who is on the Chicago PD, and she also is trying to help, get those types of resources to those communities. And also I have a friend who is on the mental health task force for the NYPD. And these are all things that people only started talking about within the last few years. And even so, like, I was born with a bright, big smile on my face. I'm like known as the entertainer. I could crack a joke in a second. Like when my mom died, I just was cracking jokes all day. I always know what to say in a moment. It's a trauma response. It's actually a response for safety. But people literally, even people who were in the mental health field who were working with trauma, they were like, you didn't look like you were unhappy at all. You didn't look like you were in pain. And I was like, I didn't know I was in pain. I knew I wasn't having fun, but I didn't know I was in pain because nobody understood trauma. So when you're speaking about that, are you also focused on like reframing and redefining what trauma is? Because trauma isn't what we think it is. It's everything. Well,
yeah, for sure. And, I wish I could say at BlueBridge Alliance, that was something, we're still just focused on helping, officers connect with the community.
Yeah.
More than just the the mental health piece. I do serve on a board.
It's a beautiful mission.
I do serve on a board for an organization called Code 4 Northwest. And, they are specifically designed to help first responders with their mental health. But what I will say is one of the coolest things I've seen is as it's become more normal for first responders to identify signs of trauma and things that are going on with their own mental health, it's actually providing them the ability to deal with those situations with the public who are in the middle of a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
One of the coolest things that I remember back when we first got started was that some officers had kind of thought about that for a second, and they discovered that a lot of times when they're responding to a mental health crisis, that mental health crisis is usually exacerbated by hunger. It's people that haven't had a meal in 5 days, and they already are struggling, and that has a huge effect. So what we were seeing was officers, when they were responding, and we've all seen this type of a situation. Somebody's marching down the street and they're yelling and screaming at everybody and nobody at the same time, and people are saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm kind of scared." And officers were showing up, taking their BlueBridge card to McDonald's on the way to respond, and getting a hamburger meal, and being there once they get on scene to this situation, and being like, "Hey, listen, I don't know if you're hungry or not, but I've got a burger here. What do you say, we sit down and chat about this?"
I love that's a beautiful mission, honestly.
Yeah, and it works out great. It de-escalates the situation. It shows, because there was a time where, the common way to deal with that kind of a person was, having 4 officers each pulling a limb,
exactly,
taking them
down, holding cell. Yeah,
exactly, and that doesn't help anybody.
It doesn't, but it also is really scary. Like when I started bootstrapping this in June of 23, I got rid of my car and I started walking everywhere, which I love walking. Walking is bilateral stimulation. It's literally neuroplasticity in real time. I used to only know how to run. I was like, walking can't help me at all, but it does. And there are some times though, when I'm walking back late at night, I don't live in a dangerous area, but it is kind of scary when there's someone who's likely schizophrenic. And I don't like using, I don't like diagnosing people, but when you're yelling in the middle of the street like that at everyone and no one, that. And by the way, schizophrenia is from an epigenetic, it is epigenetic, and it lives in our genes. It becomes pronounced through environmental factors. And it didn't just happen overnight to this person, and, I've also I've either called an Uber or I've gone the other way. And it, sometimes it is scary. And I understand as, someone just in the street, but also as a police officer, when you understand yourself more, you could help others more, right? When you could connect to yourself in a deeper way, you could connect to others in a deeper way. And that's what I think is really beautiful about the mission. And I do want to engage with the Code 4 Northwest. I think that's what it's called, because I think that's really interesting. But from what you're doing, that's just so cool that you're really helping the community in real time. I carry on. There's another man that actually has a show as part of Reviting, which is the company that actually hosts this podcast for me. They're amazing. And he actually focuses on homelessness. And I live in New York City, and I carry around protein bars all the time for me. I never have cash. I haven't had cash since I stopped serving in 2005. But whenever I'm around and there's a homeless person, I'm like, well, I don't have cash, but I have a protein bar. And you know what? You could tell when someone's hungry when they're like, we want a protein bar. And I'm like, I promise you, it tastes good, And there's even a man on the train that I take. It's called a light rail. And he was very hunched over. He's 45 degrees. And that is a sign of shame living in your body. I was becoming so hunched over in 2020 and 2021. I thought it was because I wasn't sitting at a desk. I blamed it on the chair in my house. Yeah. And it actually was from shame. So something clicked in my head. Instead of being scared of him, I was like, hey, do you want a protein bar? And he was like, this shit's going to be terrible. And he's like, this is so good. And people are hungry. They want to eat anything. So I think that's a really beautiful thing, because blood sugar can make you insane. That's the same reason when you're in a hyperarousal state, we were talking about de-escalating, that blood sugar stabilization could be better than any drug, honestly, because it's immediate. And that's why that's why those Ozempics of the world work, because it actually stabilizes your blood sugar. That's why our country has an obesity problem, because of stress level, not just the food, not just quote unquote lifestyle. Like I was working out 14 hours a week and starving myself, and I still was almost 300 pounds because my blood sugar was everywhere and I wasn't diabetic, and so that's a really interesting fact. And it's really cool because you can use that use case throughout the whole country. I love it.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, and one thing that people also sometimes forget is when police are responding to a situation, oftentimes people start out combative, and that's usually a fight or flight response that they can't help, that actually comes on because maybe previous trauma in their life that with particularly an authority figure. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a parent.
Police are scary sometimes to people.
Yeah, so
100%.
Exactly. And just a couple of weeks ago, there was a case here in the Seattle area where officers responded to it was a traffic stop, I think, and they walk up to the car and this person is just like freaking out at them, calling them all sorts of names, telling them, leave me alone. Don't you have better things to do than to bug me? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, they were able to de-escalate that. And all of a sudden it turns out that this person, had, I think the traffic stop was something like, their expired plates or something to that effect. I can't remember exactly. And, this person, came clean that, hey, they're expired because I can't afford, it's a difference between putting food on the table or driving, and I've got to get to work so that I can put food on the table. And so officers were like, hey, let's use our BlueBridge card to figure this out. And, again, I can't remember if it was like a broken taillight or if it was a, expired tags, but they solved the issue. And the next thing here, it went from this person just screaming and yelling at them to hugs all around and feeling good. Wow. And everybody, and that person saying, I've never thought that police would help me. And that's just, a huge indicator of increased trust. So,
I mean, that's a beautiful story. And truly, that's a beautiful story, because you're right. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, police won't help me. Like, I'm not even going to call the police. And when you, as a police officer, when you go into those traffic stops, you don't know what to expect. Someone could whip out a gun. And right now, I know that like no one likes to hear this, but I really do think that I like to treat this as like 2008 in terms of consumer confidence, in terms of consumer spending, right? There's not as much discretionary spending. So when you think about something like that, that's literally what's going on. People cannot afford to live. They can't afford groceries. So how can they afford whatever is going on with their vehicle? And that's something that, that's a decision that they have to make. And the fact that BlueBridge was able to solve that is so beautiful, because you're helping so many people in so many ways. Can you tell me a little bit about how your tech background translates to this? Because the reason I call myself the Trauma Translator is because neuroplasticity, the way it was explained to me when because I've been in therapy since I was 5, after my dad's first suicide attempt. Both my parents were therapists. I was surrounded by therapists. I didn't even take a psychology class in college, because I was like, I grew up in a psychology class. I didn't even, people were throwing around like diagnoses at the dinner table, screaming at each other. Like, I only hear people say like words. Like, I've only met one other person that says like some of the words that I know. And I'm like, oh, interesting. You're not a therapist either. But yeah. Like perseverate. Like, my dad used to always say to my mom, you're perseverating. And I've only met one other person that said that. Even when I said to my therapist once, she was
that's like, a 50-cent word right there.
Listen, this is what was going on in my house. My dad got into Harvard on a dare. He was as brilliant as he was unwell. But yeah, with all that said, I never was treated for trauma because nobody understood trauma, even though like I'm a textbook trauma. But also, I've been having somatic responses since under 2. So when you think about, when you're doing all of this and you're thinking about how your tech background is translating this, right? You're pulling reports, you're looking at data, you're hosting the infrastructure. My whole thing was with neuroplasticity, what fires wires. I was able to connect it to pixels. I sold JavaScript pixels. I worked at Oracle. I worked at, eBay, PayPal. So like, I go deep into tech. Like, I could be a sales engineer if I'd like. So tell me how you're able to, bring that into your current role, because I think that's a really cool path. The same way, you don't meet a lot of people with a tech background and an altruistic heart,
Yeah, well, and full disclosure, I'm terrible at coding. I'm not, I don't have like a huge um,
I'm not a coder.
background on actual coding. I came from the operations side, and what I started with was helping companies actually, especially tech startups, form. How do you form? Who do you need on your team? How do you manage the team? And kind of create coordination from chaos. And so that's really where that came in on this, because it was a brand new idea. And actually, if you don't mind me sharing where the whole idea of this, came
Share
from.
everything.
So I've lived all over the country, for my work. I spent about 12 years in San Diego. And in 2011, yeah, San Diego's great. And I was there in 2011, and I was getting ready for work. Did the same thing I do every morning, which is turn on the news just to see what's local news, see what's going on in the in the community. The prevailing story this morning was that an officer was in an underserved neighborhood. He stopped for dinner. He's sitting there at McDonald's, ordering his food at the counter. And he looks next to him, and there's this little guy from the neighborhood, like 8 or 10 years old, and he's counting out pennies to buy himself some food. Oh. And the officer looks at him and says, "Hey, guy, gotcha." And so that had a really big effect on this kid. 5 minutes later, this officer is back in his vehicle, and he's going to find a place to eat his food. And unfortunately, somebody murdered him at a stoplight. And everybody talked about how, he was by the way, he was a war veteran. He'd only been on the job, I think 6 years or so. But he was known for doing those random acts of kindness. Yeah. And I thought about, my family members that were officers and all the officers that I knew growing up, and seeing them pull their own wallets out to help people. And it got me thinking about, hey, this has a huge effect on people. And, I wonder if, there's a way that we could have community supported program, because it's pretty tough to save the world on a public servant salary, right?
100%. But most public servants, like my parents, they didn't buy anything for themselves, but they always took care of everybody that needed it.
And you see it time and time again. But I wanted to create a situation where officers didn't have to make that tough decision on whether or not, they're going to be able to, buy shoes for their kids or whatever, or are they going to help this domestic violence victim who needs a place to stay tonight, and, because the shelters are closed. So
beautiful mission. Wait, so are you, and excuse my ignorance, are you the founder of this? Is this your?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I am so sorry. I had no idea. Because when we were talking before, I got it confused with the other one. So you created this program. Wow, that's incredible. I have no idea. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't realize that.
No, it's all good.
All of this up in 2011.
Yes, and then long story short, in 2015, a good family friend who was a chief of police, we were talking about this, this idea, because I couldn't get it out of my head, and I was thinking about technologies that I've worked with that could, facilitate this. And he was like, "We're going to try it in our town." And, the community chipped in. They had, really good funding from the community for it. And it was really cool. He'd send me reports every month of how officers were using their, this concept. And it had transformational effects on their community relations. And so 2020 rolls around, and we know that was a pretty tough year.
Yeah, and, especially community relations. So, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I called him up and I said, "Hey, I think we should take this concept nationally." And he's like, "I've been thinking the exact same thing." And so we put a great team together at that point, and founded this organization and got it off the ground. We used his law enforcement operations experience and my operations at building an organization. And that's how we got going.
I love that story. Number one, I love that this is inspired. I mean, that was it. I literally, like, it made me feel ill when I heard that story, because I always think about, like, there was a movie in the 2000s, I forgot what it was, but it was like the kid that helped everybody and then he got like stabbed. And I always think of that every time I like help somebody. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably gonna get killed one day. But like, that's literally, like, I don't think that anymore, but like back in the day. And like, I truly, like, that's something that's terrifying. And especially like, no good deed goes unpunished. And that had nothing to do with him helping the child, right? But he just was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And communities do need help, and there does need to be that bridge. You have such a beautiful mission. I would actually love, when I figure out how this is going to go, I would love to have you come on again, because I feel like there's so much more to share, and I would love to connect you with some of the folks that I'm working with, so you could expand your mission and we could figure out how to help as many people as possible. Because like I said, there are a lot of groups that I'm involved with that, like, someone posted yesterday, there was a man that I had a heart attack and he lived, but he needs a lot of money and he's a police officer, and you know, this is what's going on. It's real life. And what do you do? Yeah. And how do you get the funding? So that's so interesting. I love that this is something that's truly from your heart. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And where can everyone find you and BlueBridge Alliance? How can they get involved? How can they donate? Share a little bit about that with everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, BlueBridgeAlliance.org is our main site. We're on all of the major social channels. You know, just a quick search will find us. You know, anybody is welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn as well, and connect there. So yeah, there's a ton of ways, you know, to connect with us. There's a big old donate button right on the right on the main site. So lots of different ways to, you know, to support us there. I also love receiving emails. You know, send me an email or a, you know, a message through line just to introduce yourself. If, you know, whether you're donating or not, I just love to hear from people and their experiences, and you know, hear inspiring stories.
I mean, you have such an inspiring mission, and it's really, I mean, it's needed now in society more than ever. So I pray that you'll continue to get the funding so that you can really roll this out across the country, because we need it. Everyone needs it. The police officers need it. The communities need it. And you're just helping so many people. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I can't wait to have you back again. Thank you again.
Absolutely, Lauren. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, this is the next episode will be next week on, I don't know what day it is. I think it's the 19th. And we'll be posting about the next guest. And if you're interested in joining the Anxiety Antidote event next week in New York City, don't forget to scan the QR code or message me. And we'll also put in the comments, Brian will put the BlueBridge, I think it's BlueBridgeAlliance.org, the website where you could donate, how you could reach him. And I hope you can get more involved. Everybody needs this connector. He's a suited connector, and so am I. So I'm really excited to continue and spread the word and the mission. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Don't be a Richard. So all of the jewelry that I have behind me, I'm always wearing the Camuso shift necklace. And the reason why is that it actually is an anxiety antidote. It helps you shift into calm in real time. And it's all about the exhale. So what I like to do is do a 4-4-8 breath. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, and 8 seconds on the exhale. And the exhale is where the magic happens. It actually helps reduce your heart rate. It reduces blood pressure in real time, and it helps you breathe into calm. So let's do it together. Inhale for 4. It just feels so good. This is truly my favorite. From the beach to the boardroom, you could wear it everywhere.